You're watching Behind the Headlines. I'm Pacchia. After the Supreme Court's decision in the Citizens United case, there has been a protracted debate in this country over the role corporate money should play in politics. My guest today is proposing that the SEC write new rules forcing companies to disclose their political spending. We're joined now by Robert Jackson, Associate Professor of Law at Columbia Law School. Welcome. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks. I'm delighted to be here.
So the SEC has actually taken this petition up for consideration. Take me through the backstory. How did this whole proposal come to be?
Well, after the Supreme Court decided the Citizens United case, many folks debated whether that was right as a matter of constitutional law. But because we never really thought about whether corporations should have the right to spend money on politics, we don't have any rules in corporate law, forgetting about constitutional law. We don't have any corporate law rules to figure out who decides when a company should spend investor money on politics. So I wrote an article in the wake of the Citizens United decision in the Harvard Law Review where I argued that we need to come up with some corporate law rules for how corporations should use their new power under Citizens United. And I found
how have people reacted to just that premise, that there should be any rules? I mean, there are free speech advocates out there who say there shouldn't be any rules in this stuff. It's free speech. They can kind of say and do as they please, right?
Sure, but just to clarify, I don't mean rules that limit what corporations can do. Citizens United leaves very little doubt that there's not that much room for those rules. I absolutely agree. I mean rules for who decides when a corporation spends money on politics. Is it the managers, the directors, or the owners, the investors who actually own the company? Those are the rules I was interested in formulating. And after I wrote this article, I had a number of proposals in the article about what we should do. And I found that one of the proposals was we should have disclosure of the spending. And as I gave this sort of paper and presented it around the country, I found that whatever the stripes, the political stripes of the audience, everyone seemed to agree that we should have disclosure. So I finally decided that maybe it was time to take that proposal to the Securities and Exchange Commission. And my co-author, Lucian Bebchuk, and I wrote a petition over the course of really a few days. And we got 10 law professors to join us of all types of political stripes to ask the SEC to make rules so that public companies have to tell their investors when they spend money on politics.
Now, when we're talking about spending, let's drill down here. Are we talking about direct campaign contributions, or are we also including, say, issue spending under that umbrella?
I would say both. The thing it's worth noting is that right now direct contributions by corporations are outlawed as a matter of federal law. Corporations are not allowed to give direct contributions to candidates. Citizens United was about what's sometimes called indirect spending. You described it as issue advertising. That's more or less what it is, an advertisement that is not on behalf of a candidate, but that says we really think you should elect this candidate, not that one. All of this kind of spending would be included in the disclosure rule, and here's the reason. The thing to keep in mind is that this is investors' money. It's the corporation's resources that are being spent on this. You might know that sometimes managers have their own political action committees that they put their own money into and spend their own money on all kinds of issue advertisements. That would not be captured by my rule. The rule we're proposing is designed to have investors know when their money is being spent on politics.
Now, if this rule were to be taken up by the SEC, would the United States be leading the way in corporate rules for political spending, or are other countries already tackling this issue?
It's actually a great question, and in fact, even if the SEC adopts our proposal, we'll still be well behind many other countries, including most prominently the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, since 2002, there has been disclosure of corporate spending on politics, and in that country, shareholders have a right to vote to approve or not approve the budget the company uses to spend on politics. Of course, we're not proposing that in this petition. We're only asking that investors at least know what the company is doing on corporate spending on politics.
So a lot of people have weighed in on this petition. There's something like 300,000 people signing it. There's been a lot of coverage in the media. What are opponents of this rule saying? I mean, what's the counter argument here?
So a number of, you're absolutely right. We've been very gratified that more than 300,000 individuals have written in to support the rule. Also, notably, not just individuals, but institutional investors, those who are managing billions of dollars in money, have unanimously written into the Securities and Exchange Commission urging them to adopt the rule, agreeing with us. But you're right, there have been prominent opponents of the rule. Largely, these include Republican politicians, such as the Speaker of the House and Senate Minority Leader, and also a group of prominent law professors. And typically, their arguments are that we should not there should not be a special rule for corporate spending on politics, that the amounts being spent are not material, and that anyway, the SEC should not involve itself in these types of political debates. The SEC is an investor advocate organization and should stay out of politics. Those are the arguments.
I wonder about the potential side effects for this rule coming out. Is political spending, say, day one, if this rule were to come online, is it expected just to drop? How do you anticipate companies reacting to something like this?
Sure. It's a good question, and I think one thing that opponents have said, and in particular, last week, one of the Republican commissioners on the SEC took a very unusual step, which is coming out in advance to say he wouldn't favor such a rule, even though the staff hasn't yet drafted the rule. And I think it's the intuition of these politicians, and those in the Republican Party, that this rule would be bad for their party. The assumption is that most corporate political spending goes to Republicans, and if we disclosed it, there would be less. But I don't know I understand the basis for this, because we don't have any data on corporate spending on politics. Why? Because there's no disclosure. So we have no way to know if it's the case that, in fact, most of that spending goes to Republicans. And I'll say something else about that. Suppose that's true, that if we disclose political spending, it would decrease, and that would be disadvantageous to the Republicans. That's not a reason, in my view, for the SEC not to take action. The SEC is supposed to protect investors and give them the information they need. They're supposed to do that without respect to politics. For me, it would be inappropriate for the SEC not to make a rule based on politics, as opposed to inappropriate for them to get involved in this area.
Sure. So what's next in terms of procedure? It's being taken up for consideration. When's it going to be heard, and then what's the next step?
So the SEC staff has announced that they're closely looking at the petition, and they just said a few weeks ago that it's their hope to propose a rule on corporate political spending by April of this year. Now, it's unclear whether they'll make that deadline. The SEC is working on a lot of things. But one interesting development is, of course, we have a new nominee to be chairman of the SEC. And because right now we've got 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, it's unclear whether the commission be prepared to take action. But we'll soon have a confirmed nominee, and then we'll have a full set of commissioners to vote on the rule.
Right, and one of the Republican commissioners already came out and said that he's almost dead set against the rule.
Right.
Any idea on where the other commissioners are?
Well, one of the Democratic commissioners has gave a speech over a year ago in which he said he supports the rule. Elise Walter, the other commissioner, who's now serving as interim chair, has suggested she's in favor of the rule. So we'll see. I think it will be a close vote. But one thing that's important, and you mentioned earlier the details. One thing that is very important in developing this rule is exactly what would be disclosed by whom and when. And those details haven't been worked out yet. So my own view about this is let's see what the SEC staff come up with, and then we can understand how the commissioners might vote.
Oh, it's a really interesting proposal. Professor Jackson, before we let you go, wanted to talk about the new blog that Columbia Law School has coming out. Tell us about it.
So me and some colleagues at Columbia have put together this brand new blog that's designed to sort of encourage debate on corporate spending on politics. And because this Republican commissioner came out last week opposed to the rule, today I've actually published a post that explains why the Republican commissioner's arguments give the SEC no reason not to move forward with this rule. The blog's at clsbluesky.law.columbia.edu, and the whole purpose of the blog is to take this kind of debate and move it online. And I actually published this post this morning. I've already got a few new emails with the debates raging on about these questions, and we hope folks will come and join us for that.
Cool. So people should go and check that out. Professor, thanks so much for stopping by today.
Thank you.
That's Professor Robert Jackson from Columbia Law School. If you'd like to learn more about the cases and issues we just discussed, be sure to go check out our offerings on BloombergLaw.com and also on the Bloomberg Terminal. You can follow our updates on Twitter, and you can see more of our videos on YouTube. I'm Pacchia. Thanks for watching.